This is the Royal Festival Hall in London, the home of the Philharmonia Orchestra. Back in 2005, they released an entire orchestral sample library for free. This included thousands of string, brass, woodwind and percussion samples. No sample instruments, just the recordings. There have been one or two sample instruments created from some of the sounds, but for the most part, it looks like this library has been long forgotten. I wanted to have a go at creating some sampled strings utilising these recordings. I mean, what better a source than the Philharmonia? You're listening to the finished result after I selected, edited and processed these samples with a few effects. I think it sounds okay, and that's entirely down to the performances of the Philharmonia players. First things first, I am not a sample developer. I have very limited experience in sampling. I'm also not a string player. I actually tried to sample a cello once. I hired a cello. And quite early on into the sampling process, I broke a string. So that didn't really go anywhere. This is different though. I feel like with these samples, because they're not my own recordings and because they're quite old, I feel like I have a lot less to lose. Even if I made a violin instrument and it sounded bad, at least there wouldn't be any broken strings. When I first discovered that these samples existed, I saw comments from people online talking about that they weren't great quality or they're only MP3 files. But when I had listened to them myself, I thought, oh, they sound good. After opening up and having a listen to the violin samples, I thought, okay, I can actually make something. I could make a very simple sustain violin instrument. Surely, right? Yeah, I think I could do that. The first problem was that the samples were very short and like really short. I mean, they varied from around half a second to 1.5 seconds. So I knew that was going to be a problem if I wanted to create an instrument that could hold notes for a sustained period of time. The second problem was that there was an inconsistent number of dynamics for each note, each pitch that was recorded. So some notes had a lot of dynamics like pianissimo, piano, mezzo piano, mezzo forte, forte, fortissimo, and others didn't. The third problem, there was some mislabeling in what Philharmonia had called the samples and what they actually sounded like. Some of them were louder than what the dynamic was labelled as, but that wasn't too much of a problem. So to get round the dynamics issue, I basically decided to use 3 dynamic layers across the whole of the violin instrument. I would have a quiet dynamic layer, a medium one, and a loud one. And that just involved picking out which were the best quiet ones, which were the best medium ones, and which were the best loud ones. Getting around the problem of the samples being too short was a bit more interesting, and I'm interested to see if anyone watching has any alternative ideas of what I could have done. I thought, oh, could I try and loop the sample? So basically find a section of the sample that can be looped again to extend it, but I couldn't really do that because the samples were so short that there wasn't enough of a waveform to actually loop. I thought, could I slow the samples down and stretch them out to make them longer? But I wanted to try and maintain as much as possible the original sound of the sample, and stretching it out would have made it sound a lot more kind of synthetic. So I settled on the idea of using a delay plugin and a reverb plugin to basically create echoes of the sound, and then the reverb would help to glue those echoes together. I was pretty pleased with how that sounded. It didn't sound particularly realistic but it created this kind of unique pulsating effect, which I really liked. I used Logic's sampler to make the instrument, and I came across a really helpful video by Christian Henson, and that was really useful because it made the rest of the process a lot quicker. One of the things he talks about in the video was the auto map function. And one of the auto map functions basically uses pitch detection to automatically assign them to their correct note on the keyboard. That saved me so much time because it meant I could just drag in a whole group of samples and immediately assign them to their correct pitches. To be honest, I think if I had had to go in and manually assign every sample to its key on the keyboard, I don't think I would have pursued with making the instrument. I don't think I would have had the patience, honestly. So I then pretty much had the complete violin, and I thought it was pretty successful. So I went ahead and did the same thing to the cello and the viola and the double bass. I'm now wondering about moving on to the brass and the woodwinds instruments. I think there'd be something really cool in being able to bring this 2005 Philharmonia to life. Since discovering this amazing library, it's made me realise that you shouldn't just disregard sounds or sample libraries because they're old. Everything has a use. Things don't have to sound great out of the box all of the time. You can do some processing on things to make an instrument your own. If you haven't already, I really encourage you to download the Philharmonia samples and just have a go yourself and see what kind of music you can make. And if you do make any music, please let me know. I'd love to hear it. But thank you for watching this video, and of course, massive thank you to the Philharmonia Orchestra for providing those samples back in 2005. Thanks again. Goodbye.